Hello and welcome to Conversations with Greensboro. Now I know it says Conversations with Greensboro. You all might be a little befuddled today because we're exploring North Carolina. By that I mean we have the host, the researcher, the director, the producer of the North Carolina Everything podcast, Kurtis Crawford. Kurtis, thank you so much for being on our program.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been cool. I've been kind of exploring some things around North Carolina. Me and my wife, we travel, and we're actually from New Jersey, but we love everything about North Carolina.
We let him stay.
Yeah, we're what you call a damn Yankee. Yankee comes down, spends money, and leaves. A damn Yankee stays, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to talk today about you and your program called the NC Everything Podcast, which has been cool. It explores everything from moonshine, Pepsi, Jockey's Ridge, Cape Hatteras Island, the Gold Rush, Edward R. Murrow. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, which we can talk about that too.
Yeah, I'm 90-something episodes now. I forgot to write down what my last one was, but yeah, I'm almost at 100.
Okay, let's end this now. If he didn't write down the last one.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Show's over.
Yeah, on the air, I commented on the last one, and I said I forgot to write down what that was. But so it's I jump into it a lot of times, and I take so many notes about everything, and then I'll miss little things I want to add, And that's one of the big ones. I can't tell you how many times I've started the show and realized halfway through I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning, But
well, let me ask you this. He said Jockey's Ridge. Take me back to that one and I will tell you why after you tell me.
Well, Jockey's Ridge is the largest sand dune on the East Coast. My dad took me years ago, and he was saying how big it was. It's hard to imagine how big it is until you see it. And Jockey's Ridge, what I learned through my research, that back in the day they used to, the Native Americans would actually have horse races around the sand dune, and they'd sit on the sand dune and watch it. And so it got the name Jockey's Ridge. And there's a few other stories about maybe how it got its name, but it's a ginormous sand dune, and it's actually where the Mountains to Sea Trail ends.
Right. Well, I have a very good friend, Ann Cabell Baum, and her mother was named Carolista Baum.
Yep.
And so one day, Ann and her sister went running in the house and said, "Mom, there's a bulldozer out here. They're gonna build something here." And her mother immediately went out there to stop the bulldozer, got the guy to finally quit and go home or whatever, and then she took the distributor cap off of the bulldozer and began efforts to save Jockey's Ridge so that we could all enjoy it today.
Yeah, I read a lot about Carolista. I was sad to find out she passed away, but
they're putting up a historic marker this summer for her.
Oh, really? I didn't
right
find
there
that
at
out.
Jockey's Ridge.
That's awesome. When I read it, I was thinking this little woman might, she saved that entire area. She might be one of the more important people down there in Outer Banks.
Absolutely. And yeah, just an amazing story. It's not just unique there. The same thing happened here in Greensboro to save Blandwood Mansion. Of course, these ladies did not take the distributor cap off the bulldozer, but they did stand in front of the bulldozer, which was a pretty brave thing.
Oh, yeah, especially back then, But
yeah, man. Yeah. So anyway, I just throw that in there because
Yeah.
I had a meeting this past weekend with Ann Cabell Baum, and and she was telling us that they were going to put the historic marker up there for her. So
yeah, that's really awesome to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, that is a beautiful sight to behold.
Oh yeah, and Carolista is certainly somebody I would call an unsung hero for that.
Yeah.
This past summer, my mom and my sister, they came down and we went up and down. All the Outer
Highway
Bank.
12,
Yeah, Highway 12. And we went to Ocracoke and everything. We went to the, we took the ship over from Ocracoke, and that's actually where I have the outro of the show. I actually have it on there. I couldn't resist using it. There was this one time it was storming, and I can't remember where we were, but we were near Jockey's Ridge, and there was this gorgeous thing. It was almost like when you see the picture, it almost looks like Mount Doom. You know, when Frodo and
The Lord of the Rings.
yeah, in the Lord of the Rings, when Frodo, you know, when him and Sam, they look over and they have to look at where they have to walk in the third episode of that. But anyway, I ran up to like the top of the mountain, and it's just like, it was like a split. It's like red on one side and just dark and rainy on the other.
Yeah.
And it was very eerie.
Outer Banks are an interesting place for anyone that loves the state to go out and see what's going on.
It's one of my favorite places in North Carolina. I don't get out there very much because, as you know, from this area, if you head straight out, it's the part that
It's the
sticks the
dropping
farthest
off
out.
place, yeah.
I get to the mountains a lot more, and I love the mountains, but I'd go to the Outer Banks every year if I could.
Yeah. So what all else have you done your podcast on out on the Outer Banks? And we'll work our way inland.
What my plan is, and I don't always get to stick to it, is I try to give fair coverage. So I'll hit the Outer Banks, I'll try to get to the mountains, and then I'll try to maybe get down toward, Pinehurst in that area. But let's see, I've done several things in the Outer Banks. I just covered Hatteras. The Road to Nowhere, I covered that, and that's in Bryson City. It's another one of my favorite places. And I love Western North Carolina. I did Pinehurst. I'm starting some research on some more Civil War battles, Bentonville and Aversboro, down that way. I just started doing some of that research last night. I get a lot of listener requests, so I just got done recording Andre the Giant. Yeah, and I'm trying to knock out some of the requests, you know.
Well, he was from down there in Richmond County, wasn't he?
Well, he lived in Ellerby, and
Ellerby, that's Richmond County.
And I wanted to go to Ellerby before I recorded. I didn't get a chance, so but it's still on my list.
Yeah.
So.
We've got plenty of characters in this state.
Yeah.
Or have had.
And that's one thing I've liked about it. After I started the podcast, I started researching. I didn't ever think I knew everything about North Carolina, but I've learned so much more than I already knew, you know. And it's surprising, you know. I might have forgot because my wife, she doesn't forget anything. But we were talking about Benny King last night, and she said, "You should cover him on the show." And I said, "Oh, is he from North Carolina?" "I've told you he's from North Carolina." And so I started looking into him, you know, and
Yeah.
I found out at least one member of the Shirelles. I love the Shirelles.
Oh, yeah.
They're from North Carolina.
Classic.
And a lot of musicians come from North
Well,
Carolina.
not just Benny King. You had from the Drifters. You had Clyde McFadder.
Yep.
From Durham, and just amazing. And the female singer for the Platters, I don't remember her name. She's from Charlotte.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for me, it doesn't have to be completely engulfed in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Like Pink Floyd, the Floyd part of Pink Floyd comes from Floyd Council, who's actually from Chapel Hill, and you know, so I don't know if I'd do a whole episode on Pink Floyd because of that, but I would definitely cover Floyd Council.
Yeah. I would also say put in Pink Floyd Whale and pull up a story there. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Now I'll tell you, one of my most favorite recent singers, she's from Greensboro's Rhiannon Giddens.
Yeah.
My wife, she played her on the radio one day, or we were waiting for my kid at school, and she started singing. And I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "I don't know." She looked it up. It's some girl named Rhiannon Giddens, and I mean, I fell in love with her. You know, I hadn't covered her on the show yet, but
Well, she'll be here for a concert at the end of this year at the Carolina Theater. I just came from a meeting at the Carolina Theater, so that's where I was when I came in today, and we're going to have her here. I don't remember if it's August or September, but so she'll be here.
she's going to be here in this room.
Not in this room. Well, she might be.
We can try and get her on.
We can if we want.
We can, yeah.
So, but she will be at the Carolina Theater performing. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
Because you know she lives in Ireland now.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
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 But so the Road to Nowhere. When you mentioned that, the first thing that I thought of was a couple of nights. Well, it's about a week ago. The Fugitive was on.
Yep.
You know, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that big train wreck scene is not far from right up there.
Yeah, I look at it every time I go up that way.
Yep. Yeah. That is amazing. And the screenplay for The Fugitive was written by a North Carolinian too.
Oh yeah.
So we got everything covered. Can we just say North Carolina's awesome? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of everything.
So what are your other favorites? What do you like to?
As far as the state goes,
Yeah.
you know what? I got into golf a few years ago. I wouldn't call myself a golfer. I play when I can. And golf courses are just beautiful. And at one point in my life, it was my goal to play as many golf courses around the state as I could. I realize I don't have the bank account for that, but I play as much as I can. So I covered Pinehurst, and when I covered Greensboro, I talked about Sedgwick, you know.
Right. Out at Sedgefield, Donald Ross, or
yeah. Well, in that Greensboro episode, I mentioned talking about Donald Ross, so I hadn't quite got that yet. On my phone, I have a huge list, and when I don't do listener requests, I go through and try to pick something, you know, and sometimes I just had to be in the mood for it.
What got you into it?
Well, like I was talking about earlier, I've been welding for 20 years.
Okay.
And I weld in a factory. So a lot of times I'm in a booth half the size of this room by myself, and I listen to music. And I want to say probably 2010, somebody said, you should listen to a podcast. And I said what everybody says first time I hear it. I said, what in the world's a podcast? Yep. And so I started listening to some podcasts, and I found a lot I really liked. But 2 or 3 years listening to podcasts, I'd try to find a North Carolina podcast. And at that time, there was a lot of sports, a lot of news, but I wanted, you know, kind of what I do. I wanted to hear something about traveling and you know, history and folklore. In fact, one of my earlier names was going to be North Carolina History, Mystery, and Folklore. Then I decided to shorten it, not by much, but that's kind of what I wanted to get into. And so I kept waiting for some North Carolina podcast to pop up, and one day I decided I should make my own if nobody else is going to do it. And now there's a few more out there. And I hadn't actually listened to a lot of the other ones. It's not because I'm jealous or it's competition. I'm afraid that it's going to influence how I do mine. I don't want that. And I have that bad anyway. Some of my favorite podcasters, you know, I can tell I'm trying to be like them, you know, already.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't listen to my show a lot, because I'm highly critical. I'm like, well, I'm not like the Sofa King podcast, or I don't sound like Dateline, you know, and so I try not to let that get in my head.
That's A-okay.
Yeah, that's well, it's interesting because, like, you know, I think this is why you know, Joe Rogan got so popular, is because it's just so open. I mean, he's got everything on there, every little you know, whatever is in there, every little blip, every little mess up is in there. So.
Yeah, and that was my plan, is hit record and you get what you get. And the first time I edited, the first episode I did, I think there was like 12 minutes of me just staring at my laptop, and I was like, well, I can't leave that in there, you know. And that's usually what I cut out. I cut out a lot of the periods where I had to stop and think for a second, or, you know, I share a driveway with some folks, and sometimes they'll come barreling down the driveway, and all right, I'll edit that out, you know. And a few times my brother-in-law has actually stopped to talk to me, and I was like, well, the camera's rolling, but
as long as you're not banging on the window.
Yep.
But yeah, it's hard. Like I've had probably the same issues, is where you know, I'd have something lined out, or you know, I'd read something for an intro or something like that, and I'd be like, what did I write, you know, and I'd have to redo it, and I'm sitting there redoing it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the redo's better, sometimes it's not better.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, and that's another thing. It's a flaw. I'll be recording, and I'll say something. I don't like the way I say it, so I'll say it again, and I'll say it 3 or 4 times. Then when I go back to edit it, it was fine the first time.
Sure. Yeah, you are too critical.
Yeah.
Well, you know, so we hit the mountains, we hit the sea, and all this stuff in there in the middle of the state. You know, you told me earlier before the broadcast here that you lived in Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
And you know, I heard there's a little school down there, but I don't usually say the name out loud. But Chapel Hill is such a Orange County. Let me just say, Orange County is beautiful. What's left of the farmland, the rolling hills, and then, you know, down there along Saxapahaw and all that way, it's beautiful. So I'm sure that has affected the way you look at things.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you know, I go to Hillsboro a lot.
Yeah.
I went to school in Hillsboro. We'd ride the school bus through there, and I was like, I hate this town. I don't like being in town. I'm a country boy, you know. And now I just have this huge love of Hillsboro and the history, and it's hasn't changed all that much. Same with Chapel Hill. UNC campus hasn't really changed all that much, and I have a lot more appreciation for what it is and what happened there. More so when I was younger.
What's the like old plantation that's there that actually has some slave cabins that are still left, and it's in Hillsboro? I'm trying to think of the name of it. It just blows right past me, but
the Bennett place it's just outside Hillsboro and Durham. Then you got Mount Air, which I actually haven't been to, but it's a big plantation house.
But the one I'm thinking of is the feds own it, and it's a somethingville. I can't see. This is where we should be added to the clip, but it's not Princeville, but it's something along those lines. That and it is between Hillsboro and then going over toward Yancey, Castle County, and it's amazing because it's one of the few remaining structures in North Carolina where there were actually slave cabins that are still there.
Yeah.
And well, the only other place really is further down east, but I just find that very interesting because it's you can go to South Carolina, you can go to Mississippi, you can go all over, and they've got plenty that have been left.
Yeah.
They also had more slaves there at the time, which is, I guess for North Carolina, it's a good thing we didn't have that many. But I think about that, and you butt right up to Durham almost.
Oh, yeah.
With Hillsboro. But,
yeah. And speaking of that, there's a few episodes, you've asked about what I cover. There's a few episodes that I've researched, are ready to go, and I hadn't got comfortable releasing them, and my wife has said, you got to do it. One of them, for sure, is the Kirk Holden War, and I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but more or less the Klan was fighting, blacks here in Orange County, Castle County, and Alamance County, and it got so bad that they declared martial law, and they sent the military in, and a man was lynched right in front of the Alamance County Courthouse, and I've been here my whole life. I never heard that story. And I read it, and it's heartbreaking. And, I researched that probably in the first month I started this podcast. And it's sitting in a folder somewhere, and I hadn't.
Well, you got to release it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've been holding on to it. And it's not because I don't want to show the dirty, ugly history. It's just, it's almost like I don't know. I almost hate to admit that it happened and I didn't know about it. I live right beside that area,
Right. Well, don't feel too bad. I mean, the whole Wilmington race riots, they were never taught in school in North Carolina. And some of your politicians are just now finding out about it. They're like,
I got some research done on that.
Yeah, so it's you can't feel too bad. Well, I'm sucking up all the oxygen.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine.
I love this guy.
No, I feel like I'd kind of take over a lot of times, and I'm just actually backing off just now. Just to let
well,
you
I love
kinda
history. I mean, I love history, and I worked as director of visitor experience for the state of North Carolina for natural and cultural resources. So I went from Murphy to Manteo.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful state, just rich with all sorts of stories that you don't, history books would have to be this deep to cover.
Well, I didn't always, and I know we're here to talk. I don't know if you got time for a story, but I hadn't always loved history. I used to sit on this rock dam near my house and fish, and I found out years later it was a slave dam. It was built by slaves. There's 2 or 3 of them around there. I didn't ever ask about it, didn't consider it. But I was probably in the 8th grade, and I was friends with a northerner. We were acquaintances. So I was always trying to gouge him and mess with him, me too, So I drew a Confederate flag on a piece of paper. I drew it out. And he said, "You got too many stars on that flag." And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Yeah, you do." And I don't remember how many I had, but he said the stars aren't right. It made me mad. I said, "I'm going to figure it out, And so back then, I got on this new thing called the World Wide Web, and I looked up that Confederate flag, and I learned how to draw it. But when I looked at why the Confederate flag had 13 stars, there's only 11 Confederate states. So I wanted to figure that out, and that led to another thing, and I've been researching the Civil War ever since, and it keeps building on itself, And another thing, and I tell everybody I talk to this, I like history you can touch. You know, I would love to go to Europe so I can touch that history, but I'm not there. But here in the 13 original colonies, you can travel around and really touch that history. I've been up to Antietam Battlefield, and I stood in the Bloody Lane there, and it's strange. And for me, I focus and I try to, you know, hear what they would have heard and see what they would have seen, and really, you know, soak that in. You know, that's what I mean by history you can touch.
Yeah.
You know, I've been to the spot where Stonewall Jackson was shot, and I've stood in the house where he died. You know, and for me, it's incredible to be able to touch that history. You know?
See where they buried his arm.
Yeah.
I read a book on that, and it was all about where he landed.
Yeah.
Like, and it was so much detail about where he was shot, how far he rode, where he landed, what he was wearing,
Yeah.
people that were with him, the guy that led him, because he was a local, and he carried a lot of that burden.
Yeah.
And but he was kind of just following orders. But I'm sorry to go on about that. Well, the reason I was diving into that is because my dad and I, we actually recently went to Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Last year. And it's because, you know, when I was a kid, I appreciated it a little bit, but not nearly as much. And I said, Dad, let's go back. And I know what you're talking about, because the Verbo that we got was like, it was, I don't think it was an original to the town.
Yeah.
But it was pretty old. And I think it might have been around when, you know, the whole thing happened. Anyway. But I was sitting there on the roof, and I was like, God, they pushed him through the town, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, man, like, how lucky am I that I don't have to sit here and wear that, you know, that wool uniform that they had.
Oh, yeah.
Walking around in July heat, you know?
Yeah, we've been twice, and once was in the summer, and shorts and T-shirt, the sweat's pouring, you know. And what's incredible to me, Gettysburg has developed a lot. And I know this is outside North Carolina, but we stand at where Pickett's charge started, and you look across that field, it's a mile, almost a mile. And to think these guys marched uphill while they're getting shot at the whole time, you know, it's insane to think how they fought back then. And, you know, in the Civil War, it's maybe not the worst war.
It's insane to think why they were fighting, too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It was,
And to say I'm amazed by it or I'm not in love with it, it's hard to wrap your mind around the brutality of war anyway, but especially the Civil War.
Yeah. Where most of the people that died in war died later after their wounds because of infection and those kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
That was...
And it was even worse if you were a Southerner, because they didn't have they weren't as efficient, you know?
They didn't have
Yeah.
the supplies.
They really just didn't. And McGuire did all he could to try and bring everything in, but they didn't have it, you know. And that's the sad part about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else. It's a little morbid, but we had went down to Aversboro battlefield, and again, I'm researching that now. And there's a house on the battlefield, and I can't remember which one it was, but, you know, we got a little tour of the house, and, you know, and again, I love history you can touch. So he talked about the house, and I said, well, I got a question. You know, how much of these floorboards are original? Oh, they're all original. And my brother-in-law, he said, in that room right there, the boards are discolored or whatever. I can't remember how he worded it. He said, what is that? And he said, well, actually, that's bloodstains from when they used this room for an amputation room back during the battle, you know. Yeah. And the floor, I mean, this was 2002, 2003, the floor was still stained, you know. And when I heard that, it was just, again, that weird feeling, you know.
Yeah. And to see it, that's just amazing. It's like when you go to D.C. and you see the actual blood-stained bed that Lincoln died in.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after being shot across the street from Ford's Theater. And, just things like that. I mean, our history is so short compared to European history. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will never forget when I was a freshman at Wake Forest, and I had to take world history. And world history is one just huge amount of information.
Yeah.
And then you look at U.S. history, and it's 250 years, and that's it. You know, it's like, hey, I can knock this out, and I'm going to binge read this one.
And there's still so much there, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend in Scotland, and I was talking to her about going to Civil War battlefields and stuff, and how I love that old stuff. And she commented, "There's a wall outside my house that was built in the year 1200."
Yeah.
Like, oh man, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, you know, you're talking about the earlier about the Outer Banks and being out there. One of the things, and Brian hears me, you know, talk about it, because to me it's a metaphor for so much in our life. But when the Wright brothers first flew, they marked it, and then when they flew the second time, they marked it. Every time they got further and further. And the answer to why is they were learning how to fly.
Yeah.
There's no manual. You don't go read how to fly. So you watch how they go further every time. And I think that tells us in life, it's a metaphor of you build on what you've done.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to get off subject here a second, but what type of welding do you do?
I do aluminum MIG and TIG welding.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Now, I have my own shop at home, and I do some steel welding there, stick. But for
the aluminum.
almost 20 years, I've been aluminum welding.
Wow.
Yep. And more specifically, like I was telling Ryan, it's airtight aluminum welding.
Wow.
So,
That's
how
very
long have you been doing that?
specialized.
How long have you been doing that?
with the company,
Yeah, or how long have you been welding in general?
I've been welding 21 years. I've been with the company 19 years. So I started 3 days before I turned 21. So
Wow.
yeah.
Was there anything specific that got you into welding, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Another funny story. When I decided I wanted to go to school for something, I knew it was going to be community college. There's nothing wrong with that. But my wife and her family, and she knows this story, and if she hears this, she'll be rolling her eyes. But my wife and her family said, you should go into heat and air conditioning. That's where the money's at. And they weren't wrong necessarily, but I don't like being pushed around. And over 6 months, it was heat and air conditioning. I just got tired of hearing it. Well, Alamance Community College, they had their orientation night, and you go up and sign up for classes. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I welded in high school. Now, keep in mind, I welded in high school for a little bit. It was like I was in the wood shop, but you had to do a little bit of welding. And the welding teacher said at the end of it, he said, you know, one day you may be an architect or something, but you ain't never going to be a welder. And so I didn't want to be a welder. I hated welding, you know. So anyway, orientation night came at Alamance Community College, and we're walking around, having no idea what I want to take. But I see one of my friends up there. And I said, hey, what are you doing here? And he said, oh, I'm the advisor of the welding department. And I turned back to my wife and said, all right, I'm taking welding. And that was it. And I've more or less done it just to make her mad.
Hey, it worked.
Yep.
Well, obviously, it was a good move.
Yep.
I will tell you, I worked for, most people won't even know what this is anymore, but I sold Yellow Page ads right out of college working for the
The heck
phone
is that?
company. Yeah, forget it. And I was in Asheville. We moved around the state like we would go in for 5 weeks, work a major book, and then we'd move on to another one. And the books printed at different times of the year. So I was up in Asheville. And this was during, this was probably years after, but not many years after, they had completely redone the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
So I called on this welder, and it was a woman. And she said, yeah, I just opened the shop back up. I'd been up in New York doing welding on the Statue of Liberty. And I go, really? She goes, yeah, go in my office in there, and there's a book on there. And I went and started turning pages. It was just amazing about the infrastructure, the structure inside of the Statue of Liberty, and how much was needed to be done. Well, fast forward, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years ago, whenever Marty Curtis opened up Pig Pounder Brewery here, he was showing me around and telling me all about what he'd done. And he had these bar stools. He goes, yeah, I had those custom made up in Asheville. And I said, really? I said, I met a female welder up there. He goes, well, this lady, this is a woman is a welder that did my design and everything here. And he's got, you know, they're interesting. They're, I've never seen them anywhere else, but Marty got a design in his head for them, and if you go there, they're very interesting. In how you, but you can do anything. I mean, if you know how to do it.
Oh,
and I'll
yeah.
also, one other story, but when I worked for
This is like Lieutenant Columbo. One more thing.
One more thing.
One more thing.
When I worked for the gas company one summer, you know, the welders were like gods. I mean, everybody else, this was back before plastic pipe. And so when they would do, cathodic protection and different things for pipes, I mean, these guys would walk in. They had somebody dig the holes and the trenches, and they'd come in and jump in there and weld. And it was almost like Elvis getting out of the hole. They pat their sweat down and send them on. And but I may be exaggerating a little bit, but the welders were considered the top of all of the operations for the gas company. And I think now about all this plastic piping, it's like, there's no artistry to put the plastic pipe in.
No, you just
put it down, screw it
in.
Yeah, well,
make sure it's tight.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect when I hear somebody's a welder. It's just I go back to one of my.
Well, you talk about artistry. I'm thinking about, because this made me think about it when you were talking about the lighthouses, the Cape Hatteras lighthouse, and all that stuff. Well, when you go to the Currituck lighthouse, and you walk up there and you look at how high you are up, and even the design of the pieces that are holding up the house. I mean, they're gorgeous. You know what I mean? And I was like, just to think how much time, because nowadays they'd bolt it in and be done with it and move on to the next project.
Cast it.
But they put this beautiful artistry into the pieces that are just the construction pieces are just gorgeous.
Yeah,
and I think about the time that they took to do that.
Yeah, I got a great picture from the inside of the Currituck, of the spiral staircase going down. And like you said, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And you can go down to Bald Head Island and see a wooden staircase that they have to replace all the time.
Yeah.
And you would think with the corrosion and the salt that these ones with the metal stairs would be, but they
Did you say
last
collusion?
a long time.
Collusion or corrosion?
Corrosion.
Oh.
No collusion here.
Okay, so you were talking about, I kind of got nuggets out of your podcast, and you said, how long had your family been here? I thought I heard you say your family heritage had been here for 300 years.
Yeah, my family came in from Jamestown. I've actually traced them back to when they landed in Jamestown, and then they made their way down to Orange County, and that's the Crawford family, and the Thompsons. They've been here forever too. Southwestern Orange County, or Alamance County. I'm sorry, most of southwestern Alamance County, it was all Thompson property, which is my grandmother's side. In fact, one of the Thompsons, his nickname on his gravestone is actually Pioneer Thompson. And they more or less settled the Saxpaw area, Swepsonville, that whole area.
That's a beautiful area too.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've been down at the river. Oh, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's picturesque. It's of course, most of the younger people today would know where the Haw River Ballroom is. So
Well, my wife's grandmother's from there, so she's told us stories, and so I've heard a lot about the Haw River. Otherwise, I wouldn't know anything about the Haw River Ballroom.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, what else in North Carolina sticks out to you that you've really loved more than all the rest of them? What?
It's hard to say. I know mountains to see is cliche, but I do. I love the mountains and I love the sea, and and I can't get enough of it. And it's not uncommon. I enjoyed the ride up here. I didn't get on the interstate. I took the back roads. I wanted to see it.
Good.
And it's not uncommon for me and my wife we'll be 30 minutes from home. It'll turn into an hour and a half trip just riding around. And again, I love Western North Carolina, but usually when you're going to the mountains, I think it's about Hickory when you first start seeing some peaks. And, I get excited. So, and that doesn't mean there's no part of North Carolina I hate, but I haven't covered everything yet. I got a Chimney Rock episode coming up, hopefully soon. And a lot of times when I get on the coast,
is it in the can, or you've already visited Chimney Rock?
Oh, I've been to Chimney Rock dozens of times. We were up there recently, actually. It had snowed that night and iced. And so we were coming down the steps and parts of it were frozen. And we were standing, I don't know if you've ever been.
Oh, yeah.
Halfway down, you're on a landing. It's a big area. And I got tinnitus, I can't hear that good. We're sitting there and my 5-year-old screams and moves that way. So I moved that way and looked, and a chunk of ice probably the size of this table came off the mountains, and it's crashing through the trees. And luckily it didn't hit us. We could have been pretty badly hurt, but.
Well, and that Hickory Nut Gorge area, that's where the last of the Mohicans was filmed.
Oh yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah, that was. If you don't think it's beautiful, go rent the movie.
Yeah.
The thing is, there was a family that owned Chimney Rock forever and ever, and then the state had the opportunity. I say opportunity; it always happens.
Yeah.
Because family gets to the point where the property taxes are either going to eat them up, or they can't run it like a business anymore. So the state bought Chimney Rock Park, but they let the family continue to be the concessionaires for the gift shop and the whole thing. But,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful formation.
Yeah.
And to be able to look down and see Lake Lure and, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times we go to the mountains, we take 64 most of the way up. I love Highway 64, especially when you get around Lake Lure and Chimney Rock through that area. But, the interstate is certainly faster, but you don't get to see quite as much.
No, it's not worth it. No. And, I think about places like Old Fort and areas over there that are, there's a thing called Andrews Geyser.
Yeah.
And it's a man-made geyser, but the guy that was like president of the railroad had it created so that people that would stop on the railroad and stay in their hotels that the railroad owned, it would be like an attraction. And it took years and years, but they restored it now. And you can go out there, it's in the middle of nowhere because the hotel's now gone, and you can see where the railroad is.
Yeah.
But the geyser just shoots up. It's a funny thing to think, well, that's man-made, and I'm out here looking at it.
Yeah.
It's like taking the garden hose. But
Now so you go a lot of different places. Do you use these as like family trips with your kids and things like that?
Yeah, my one of my brother-in-laws lives up in Cherokee, and so a lot of times we'll go visit him or have to take him something, and we'll make a weekend out of it.
Take the long way around.
Yeah. So recently, with my wife's grandmother passing, we had to take him some inheritance business. And so we took the weekend, we stayed in Maggie Valley and then spent some time with him, and then took our time coming home. That's when we were at Chimney Rock and almost got hit by the ice, and
it's such a beautiful part of the world.
My oldest kid, I don't think likes it as much. He's 15 now, so he's like, how long are we gonna be gone? And he's like, how far away from home are we? We're 4 hours, and then 9 hours later we finally pull in the driveway, But,
4 hours if you were with another family.
Yeah. Yeah, but even my brother-in-law who lives in Cherokee, he rode with us one day, and he had commented that he didn't want to ride with us no more because it takes us forever to finally get home,
Yeah, my dad was one of these when we go on vacation. He'd always, and I'll never forget the one of the long vacations that we took. We went, from Nashville to Memphis, and we didn't take the interstate. It got off of 40, and there's a highway very equivalent to like our 64 runs parallel to it, and we hit every little town or whatever.
And I'm spontaneous. I had to be real careful. Again, these aren't North Carolina. But one day I told my wife I wanted to watch the sunrise over Charleston Harbor. And she said, when? And I said, in the morning. And we didn't do it in the morning, but we rode down to Charleston and got there just in time to watch sunrise, And one time we were in the Outer Banks, and she'd commented, she said, we're only like 4 hours from Delaware. And I said, I've never been to Delaware. And so we went to Delaware, and I think it was Delaware Beach State Park. We got up there just before dark. We sit on the beach for 20 minutes, and then we headed home through Annapolis,
Wow. Well, what's funny is if you go in the summertime to up there at Corolla, and you see all the cars have DC license plates, Delaware, Maryland. They come from 3 specific areas there. But those people generally don't go and stay in Kitty Hawk and Nag's Head. They stay up there in Corolla and have for years. So it's kind of a traditional thing.
And you can really see the difference a lot when you're in the southern part of Outer Banks, just the fishing towns and the gas stations. And when you get up around Duck, it starts getting a little fancier.
It's the tourist area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All
the mini golfing.
Yeah.
The horse trails or the horse tours.
Yeah.
Up above. Oh yeah.
And then I learned that's where Taylor Swift and there's somebody else who's famous who lives right next to her.
Up there where the ponies are?
Yeah, where the ponies are, where it's actually a reserve.
Yeah. That's some pretty country up through there. Except during a hurricane.
Yeah.
You can have it then. Yeah.
Which was the formation? A lot of those inlets were hurricanes, right?
Oh yeah, and the Outer Banks is actually moving toward the inland. I think it's centimeters per year, but the Outer Banks are slowly coming to shore just from all the currents and the hurricanes.
Well, Brian and I had this conversation not long ago, but I tell people, if you've never been to the Outer Banks, you need to go now. You need to go while Highway 12 can actually go from Pea Island to Hatteras.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking about Hatteras, and I was just thinking, you were talking about how much, you could actually see the sound and the ocean while you're in the car. And a lot of it, it's depending on when or what just happened, how much rain had just fallen, but a lot of the road is just flooded.
Oh, yeah.
Which if you're in just a regular Kia sedan,
Yeah.
it doesn't work out.
In a rainstorm. Just a little
We
rain.
were in a rainstorm. It was just after, I think it had rained like the day before or something, but it holds on to some water for a while.
Yeah, and last time we were down there was parts of it, we'd be riding along and the road would disappear. It's there, but it's covered in sand.
Well, you hope it's there.
Yeah. You just, like he said, trying to stay between the ocean and the sound best you can,
I have it's a print of a painting that R.B. Dance, who was a North Carolina-based artist, drew of Hatteras Lighthouse. The most interesting thing about that picture is, today, the lighthouse wouldn't even be in the picture frame.
Yeah.
Because they moved it so far that I would be looking at just the ocean in this print. And you just, it's like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of research that goes into this, into your podcast. I was curious as to how much actually doesn't make it on the air.
Most of it does make it onto the air.
does.
I'll read as many articles as I can find. Sometimes it's one or two. Sometimes it's 10 or 15. And I'll put together the information. A lot of it, when you read that many articles, it repeats itself. But I try to include just as much as I can. When I first started, I decided I want to get an hour-long podcast, every episode an hour. I quickly realized that wasn't viable. And so now, if I can get 20 minutes, after 20 minutes, I'm fine.
Well, that's good because most people can only listen for so long.
Yeah. And see, I weld 10, 12 hours a day. So when I used to look for podcasts, I'm looking for the hour-long shows. Yeah. But you're right, most people listen on their commute to work, stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard because sometimes there's others that are, like Jocko, he does his podcast for like 3 hours. And I try and go with, whatever happened latest.
Yeah.
So I always have mine that just happened latest. Well, unfortunately, his keeps coming to the top because by the time I get to the end of his, I can't get to anybody else's, Everybody else's kind of drops off, and it's a winding cycle.
It's segmented now, and it used to not be. It used to be you just would look, but you've got these true crime podcasters, and then you've got people that are political podcasters. Then you've got,
and you could go on.
You've got everything in the world to choose from.
It's insane how much. Well, you're a true crime fan. I know you said you're a Dateline fan. Right?
Yeah, I love true crime. A lot of it's true crime. My podcasts are true crime and history. The ones I listen to. So.
Well, he knows I've been enthralled with this Murdoch murder thing down in South Carolina.
Oh yeah, I think it was Dateline I heard that on. Never heard that story, and I got invested in that.
Oh boy, me too. I was at the trial all last week. I'd leave here and I'd go and put it on YouTube and watch the day's testimony. It was like, oh my God.
That's the thing. I get so busy I hadn't been able to keep up with it, but it's insane. It's almost like a movie plot.
I was at a meeting before I came in here, and Nancy Hoffman, who is the city councilman here, she lived in Beaufort for a long time, and she still has a house down there. And we got to talking about the Murdoch thing, and she goes, even if you're from North Carolina or anywhere in the South, those rural counties that are out in the middle of nowhere, there's always that one family that just is prominent. And here's this family down there for generations that had been in charge, had been solicitors, and all of a sudden, you got one egg goes pretty bad. And, I'm being kind.
Yeah, well, the question about what doesn't make it on the air is just I guess that's kind of a inside the trade kind of thing, because I've done documentaries and stories and all kinds of things, and there's so much that I couldn't let on because I had to kind of narrow it down to what I needed.
No, for me, most of the time, I wish I could fatten it up a little bit. I actually, Andre the Giant, I just recorded and I got done. I was like, I wish there was more, and there probably is. I just, I did all I could with it, and I say that because I've listened to podcasts on Andre the Giant that are 45 minutes, hour long, and I think I got 25, 28 minutes, something like that.
How long ago did he die?
Do what?
How long ago did he die?
It was, I just covered it on the show. 90.
Well, it hasn't been that long.
No, it ain't been that long.
Yeah.
I want to say 94. I might be wrong about that.
And there were several, he was kind of like Richard Kyle. He was one of those people that wrestled and did all sorts of things and then landed spots in movies to play specific, jawbreakers and enforcers and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
January 27th, 1993.
93.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was watching a thing popped up about him and Hulk Hogan wrestling, and Hulk Hogan tried to pick him up the first time.
Good luck.
And he couldn't.
Yeah.
Because that was the big thing. That was supposed to be the big WrestleMania moment, was the slam, that he picked him up and slammed him. And he said the first time he tried to pick him up and he couldn't do it. And he said, oh, man, like throughout the match, he's like, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, man, oh man. But we that's the other thing. We've got so much. North Carolina is such a. It has a lot of healthy contradictions. You know, you've got things that just don't go together, but yet they do go together in a unique way. I mean, all these wrestling people, but I think, like, for example, when Jim Crockett Promotions used to be in Charlotte, it was started in Charlotte, and then later migrated and became Turner Broadcasting. They used to, I grew up in Gastonia, and you could go to Charlotte and you'd see wrestlers on the street in restaurants, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Ric Flair going down 49 in a little roadster, a Mercedes Roadster with the top down. You can't help but spot him. I mean, my gosh, that platinum hair going in the breeze.
Oh, yeah.
That tan.
Was he wearing the robe?
Oh, no, but he had the women, he had the belt.
I've actually not met a lot of celebrities, but my wife, early on, years ago, she worked at Subway, and she told me that Booker T. Washington, is that right? Booker T.
Booker T. and the MG.
Yeah, Booker T. and Chris Van Dam, they both walked into Subway.
Wow.
And she didn't know who they were, but one of her male coworkers freaked out, and she's, I think they're famous. I said, who is it? She said, it's Booker T. and Rob Van Dam. And I said, oh my God, I can't believe that. But
I'm telling you, man, you just never know.
You never know.
Yeah. But North Carolina is a wonderful state, rich in history, music, true crime.
Oh, yeah.
The world is your oyster right
Yeah.
within the confines.
yeah.
So your podcast can be found YouTube, Google, Pandora, Spotify, Apple.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch of others. I
yeah.
saw your website, and we couldn't list them all. But
Yeah, and pretty much wherever you get podcasts. Yeah. And like I said, you can search the NC Everything podcast on YouTube now, and not all the episodes are on there. I started, later. And then, of course, the website, www.thenceverythingpodcast.com. And I'm not much of a web designer. When I was getting ready to launch my podcast, I listened to podcasts on how to podcast, and for a long time.
who knew there was such a thing?
Yeah, there's a lot of podcasts that teach you how to podcast. And one thing that kept coming up, they said, you need a website, And I really don't know if I need a website, but I have one, and I try to keep it looking nice, but I don't know what I'm doing on that part of it. When I got started, I listened to how to podcasts, and I did a lot of Google searching on audio and visual and editing, and and I like to tell you about all my software, but truly I'm just winging it,
Yeah.
But I'm still just winging it.
Well, now, so when did you start?
Oh man, I really don't even know. 2 years ago, I think I think it was August was when I launched my first episode of 20. Might have been August 2020, I think.
3 years.
And you've done, what, 94, 95 episodes since
Yeah.
then?
But like I said, I was talking to you earlier. Last year at June, my last episode was in June, and I had to shut it down. I was taking care of my family, and I started back after New Year's this year. So I did take a long break there.
And now you're doing them about every other week?
Yeah, now I've reverted to every other week. I was doing every single week.
Do you hear from people that listen?
Oh yeah, I get emails and a lot of times in Facebook Messenger, and they, that's the thing is, there's been a lot of times where I'm like, I can't really do this anymore. It's time to shut it down. And out of nowhere, somebody's like, "Hey, I just found your show. I love it," and then it's back up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why I found you. I was kind of exploring, just things about Actually, I just looked up Greensboro, and you popped up.
Yeah.
So you're popping up under other avenues, and so I was like, "This is cool." I said, "We need to have this guy on. This is pretty cool."
Crawford is a good name in North Carolina. I know Western North Carolina. I knew a lot of Crawfords, and they were all just fine folks.
Yeah. And, now I've done some genealogy research, and there's Crawfords all the way out in Illinois. Or Illinois. My fingers now call it Illinois. But best I can tell, it all comes from the same Crawford family in Scotland.
Yeah.
But they're all over the United States now. So.
Well, the director of the symphony, I parked beside her in the parking deck, is Lisa Crawford. So it's like, you're surrounded.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to have I think the agriculture, the county agent in Guilford County used to be a Crawford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I appreciated, like your Queen City. That was a huge episode. I felt like that was pretty dense.
Oh yeah, it was.
Or thick, as you said. That was the word you used.
Yeah, and that was one of the ones. And then happens, I start to research, and then really quickly I realized, oh shoot, I have a lot of information here, and it takes me a little bit longer to put it together. And I'm kind of glad I'm doing bi-weekly now, because when I was doing weekly, I'd try to stay 3 or 4 episodes ahead. But I get behind, and then I'm just hustling, and I feel like my show was suffering because of that. I didn't have the time to really put together a lot, and really get ready for the episode.
You ever think about putting a best of montage together of some of your shows?
I have thought about it. The thing is, I hadn't went back and listened to a lot of them. I listened to Greensboro all the way up here, and it's one of the first ones I've actually listened to. I mean, outside of editing. And I sound tired, and I'm like, oh man, I probably was tired. And it's like, you can't hear how much I love North Carolina in that, because I sound like I'm exhausted. But
there was one episode, I think it was the Charlotte one, maybe. You were sitting out on your porch, and there's the latest one I was watching.
Yeah, I loved it. I even commented, man, he looks so comfortable out there on the porch.
And you commented, you said I'm exhausted, and you said I may fall asleep during this one, and I'm sorry.
I have fallen asleep a lot, not lately, but when I first started, I fell asleep a lot.
Are you still full-time welding?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, how do we get you today? Is today day off, or?
Right now, since I'm doing the welding instruction, I make my own hours.
Gotcha.
And I mean, I don't just make them up how it suits me, but I'm on third shift this week, so I got off at 5 o'clock this morning, and I'll be going in at 9 o'clock tonight.
Going to sleep.
God bless, man.
Yeah,
we got to get you home so you can take a nap.
Yeah. I got to get some sleep before I go in.
Oh man. Are you seeing anything? You drove here. Are you seeing anything on your way? Are you going to visit anything in Greensboro while you're here?
Not this time. My wife is my navigator, and so I'm.
You mean you actually have her with you, and you didn't bring her in?
I asked her. I almost begged her to come with me. I'm like, it ain't the same without you. But she's got to work. But so without her, I'm gonna stay on the path. I ain't gonna go wandering.
Yeah. Well, that Burlington Road out here, it's got a lot of history on it. And when you get out to Charlotte Hawkins Brown Palmer Institute, that's a huge thing. That was an African American prep school.
Yep.
And you had Nat King Cole's wife went there, and there are pictures of her and Nat King Cole in the Canary Cottage there. I mean, just so much history. Again, going out that road.
And that's how a lot of times I'll find episodes, the historical markers on the side of the road. We'll see them, and I'll make a note of it. Or like I seen Bennett College on the way up here.
Right.
I made a note of it on my phone.
Yeah.
I'll look into that. And so a lot of times it is just riding around and seeing something that sounds interesting.
Well, we need to have you back.
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah.
Oh yeah, it was an experience. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed learning about I didn't know anything about the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
We got 3.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of cool little snippets. I guess I don't know. I latch on to like just ridiculous information, like the David Sarnoff.
Yeah.
Learning about when he found out about the Titanic.
Yeah.
They got word via telegraph that the Titanic was sinking. He said it's an unsinkable ship.
Yeah.
He said ignore any other.
Yeah, he thought it was a prank.
Ignore any other telegram that comes in. Meanwhile, they're dying out there.
And I don't know if it would have saved anything if they didn't ignore it, but
right,
it's interesting that North
were a
Carolina
long
was
way
first.
off.
They were a long way off.
Yeah.
But the indifference really does look crazy today.
Oh yeah.
In hindsight.
Yeah. But anyway. I think that's about all we have for this podcast. Or this podcast. Wow.
So he's already in.
I'm in podcast
He's taking
mode.
from this guy.
Yeah.
This episode. Thank you so much for being on. What do we have to look forward to? What's coming down the pipe? I know you kind of hinted to it earlier. What's coming down the pipe?
A lot of times I try to keep my episodes kind of close to my vest, I guess. But I just recorded Andre the Giant. I'm looking into Bentonville, the Civil War battles, Bentonville, Aversboro. They're all listener requests. I have Carthage, North Carolina, one of my favorite towns. Yeah. They're apparently famous for their carriages, and somebody suggested their carriage factory up there, so I'm looking into that. I think Tyson and Jones Carriage Factory is what it's called. So that's what I'm working on in the immediate. And I try to throw in some state parks every once in a while. I'm trying to actually do them in order.
Right.
So my next state park, whenever it comes up, will be Pettigrew State Park.
Yeah.
So,
But that's definitely a lot of good history down
yeah.
there. Good history. Well, I think
Yeah, I think
it's
that's
been a great show.
Yeah, we might have to have you back when you.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Talk about some different episodes that you have on. Find it anywhere. NCEverythingPodcast.com.
Yeah, the NCEverythingPodcast.com.
The NC Everything Podcast. Find it on Google, Pandora, Spotify, Apple.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being on, and thank you for joining us on this program.